Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. This is not a video that I usually make, but here we go. Everyone seems to like them, so today I am doing a 2019 end of quarter wrap up. So these are all of the books that I have read so far between January and March, the first quarter of the year. Somehow I've managed to read 24 books in this time period. I'm not really sure where I found the time to do that, but I have indeed done it. Some of them were part of the Women in Fantasy readathon that took place in early March. Some of them were audiobooks, and others of them were books that I have read with the book club that I run here at my public library in the city. So my first book of the year was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I heard about this book on the New York Public Library's podcast, The Librarian is In, and was compelled to read it with my book club. It's fairly short. I think it's only about 130, 150 pages. It's a translation from the original Japanese. It is about a woman who has spent the majority of her life working in a convenience store and the struggle that she faces trying to be the person that she enjoys being and work and live in the place that she enjoys and feels most comfortable in, and society's expectation that she be different or be more than that. There are a lot of opinions about this book, both in terms of how well it's done and sort of where it doesn't go far enough or the point that it misses, which I think is a really interesting discussion that's happening right now. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars and would definitely recommend it. The next books I read were by Jessica Townsend, who I know has been getting a lot of buzz for her middle grade books here on BookTube. Rebecca gave me Nevermoor, The Trials of Morrigan Crow for Christmas, and I devoured it very quickly and subsequently read the next book in the series, which is called Wundersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow. These books, people are relating to Harry Potter in a way. They're about this girl named Morrigan, and she discovers that she sort of belongs to this group of people in a different, I don't want to say dimension, but a different world that's outside of her own, and she discovers a bunch of magic that she didn't know existed, and it's about sort of her trials getting into this school that she is sort of, it's a little bit like her birthright to go there, and also the second book is more about what she goes through after she's already in, and her time there. There are probably a lot greater reviews than what I have just told you about these 2 books out there. I'm really looking forward to the third. These are really fun, really inventive, really great story to them, and I can't wait to continue with the series. So next, if you follow me on Goodreads, you'll see that I'm slowly working my way through a bunch of books by Alexander McCall Smith, and that's because there are 12 books so far in this series, the first of which is 44 Scotland Street. This is a series that my mother suggested that I read, that she has also read, and I'm familiar with a little bit just by name, given my time that I lived in Edinburgh, and they are such a delight, this series. So there's 44 Scotland Street, which kicks it off. Espresso Tales is the second book. Love Over Scotland, The World According to Bertie, and The Unbearable Lightness of Scones were the 5 that I have read so far. Maybe that's 6. I think it's 6 that I've read so far. All of them are delightful. They were originally published, the first 2 books, as a serial column in The Scotsman. So they are written as if you're just getting a little chunk of story every day, as you would when you open, you know, the morning paper over coffee or something. So they're very easy to read. You can put them down and pick them back up without really losing your place, because you're not so far jarred from the story, and they're not written really to be read in one full sitting. So it's been nice sort of reading them across a number of days, and always having that sort of bit by bit chunked out story to come back to, and all of these characters have become really lovable. Like I said, there are 12 books in this series, and I'm making my way through them across the course of the year, and I am just enjoying them. It's very nostalgic for me to read about these characters in places where I am very familiar with, so those have been really fun. In late January, early February, I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, and by a lot I mean more than usual, and my usual is none, and I started with Gail Honeyman's Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This book is about a woman. I had no idea that the book was set in Glasgow, so I was really excited when the narrator was putting on some really excellent accents. The woman who narrated this book is actually someone who has been nominated and has won awards for her narration and for her voice work, and I'm not at all surprised. Eleanor Oliphant is a character in this story who has clearly had some sort of traumatic past, and she is very different from other people, and they don't really know what to make of her. She's very much an outcast, and she's befriended by this guy from work called Raymond, who sort of helps her see things in a different way just through their friendship. And it's very good. It's very compelling. I've obviously not read the text version, the paper version of this book. I've only listened to it, and I can't recommend it enough. Absolutely fantastic, really gripping. Not the most happy of stories, but very, very well done. I would highly recommend this book as well. Another audiobook that I read at the same time was What Happened by Hillary Clinton. I heard about this on a different podcast and thought that it would be nice to give it a try. I hadn't read anything that had been written by a political figure in quite a long time, and so I figured I would start with this. It was really impactful to hear this read by the author. So Hillary Clinton is telling you all of these things that she's written out, and she's doing it in the way that she feels it and intends it. She is not the best audiobook narrator out there, but that's not really her goal in life, so you can't blame her, really. This was an interesting look back in the 2016 election and sometimes before and after that, and sort of her hope for the future. It was an interesting take on the past few years, and if you are interested in political stories that are nonfiction, then I would recommend this. Then I read Famous in a Small Town by Emma Mills, who is one of my very favorite YA authors. All of her books are fantastic. I have not yet been really disappointed by one. I did a review of this book, which I'll link in the description if you want to check it out. This is just a wonderful story about a girl who is in a small town, and she and her marching band are trying to raise a bunch of money so that they can march in a parade later in the year. She gets a new neighbor who she welcomes into her friend group, and he has sort of a little bit of a mysterious, like, doesn't want to get too attached to any people type of thing going on, and so it's about the way that she weaves her friendship with him. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. Would highly recommend if YA is your thing. I won't say too much about this next book that I read, which was Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, which I actually was rereading. I asked my book club to read it, and I reread it with them. I did a review on this book as well. If you want to check that out, I say more there. This is such a beautiful piece of literature. I definitely would recommend it if you are interested in topics of race and also literary fiction. It is a beautiful, beautiful piece, and I would be interested to read more of her work, and I hope that it is coming. If you have followed us for a long time, you will know how big a fan I am of the Flavia de Luce books by Alan Bradley, the mystery series that begins with The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. It is about this girl named Flavia, who I always say incorrectly. I say her name Flavia, but it is Flavia de Luce, and she begins the series as a 10-year-old girl living in this big, old, dark, creepy mansion with her fathers and her sisters in England in the late 50s. And so this series has been 10 books long, and it finally came to an end with The Golden Tresses of the Dead, and it was such a lovely, touching ending. I really enjoyed this book. I also, on the tail of it, discovered that Alan Bradley had written another sort of Flavia de Luce story called The Curious Case of the Copper Corpse, which was very, very short. I actually read it as an ebook. I think it was 25 pages long on an ebook. So very, very short. Doesn't really count as a book for the year in my mind, but Goodreads is counting it, so here it is. If you like a precocious young narrator, these are the books for you. Really great mysteries, not super boring and methodical from book to book. A wonderful setting, especially if you lived through the 50s and 60s. Flavia is a wonderful character. I like her far better than Nancy Drew. We all know that my girl detective heart belongs to Trixie Belden, but Flavia, however you say her name, is a wonderful, wonderful person to read about, and I couldn't have been happier with the way that this wrapped up. Long about Valentine's Day time, Goodreads started suggesting to me anti-Valentine's Day books, and so I was like, all right, fine, I'll bite. This one, called How to Date Men When You Hate Men by Blythe Roberson, had just come out. The author is a writer on Stephen Colbert's show. I thought this was going to be really interesting. When I checked it out at the library, the person at the circulation desk looked at it and looked at me and said, good luck. So I took that for what it was. And frankly, looking back, that was some really great advice, because this was not as interesting and witty and a sort of social exploration of feminism in modern dating culture that I expected. It was more of her own experiences, and it wasn't really set up to succeed the way it was described in the introduction. I thought about doing a review of this book in full, but I couldn't really articulate well why this didn't work for me. I think I wound up giving this like 2.5, maybe 3 stars on Goodreads. I'd be curious to hear, if you've read this book as well, what you think, because this did not land in its critique of society. It did not land well with me at all. From there, I moved on to a book called Rabbit Cake, which I actually checked out and was pondering for having my book club read, but then decided ultimately not to, because I read the first chapter and was like, okay, I think this might be a book that I picked out for myself and was going to ask people to read, and not really a book that ultimately everybody would enjoy. And so I decided to just read it for myself, and I'm really glad that I did, because I gave this book 2 stars. Rabbit Cake is about this girl called Elvis, whose mother has just died, and she and her sister and her father are struggling with the aftermath of that. Elvis is a 10-year-old girl. She is the narrator, and so there has been a little bit of back and forth about, is this a YA book and is this an adult book, which really harkens back to a topic that I made a video on many years ago called Is It YA or Is It a Young Protagonist? It was supposed to be funny and ironic, and Elvis is supposed to be sort of this weird smart kid who nobody understands, and none of the humor landed with me. I had a lot of expectations. I wrote a full review on Goodreads of this because I had to get a lot of feelings out, but I just couldn't understand the acclaim that I had read about, and so if you have read this book too, I would be really interested to know your thoughts on it, because I feel like I went into it with a lot of real excitement and anticipations for something great, and it did not work out the way that I intended. From there, I sort of switched gears and I started Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved this book. You can watch my review if you want to about it. It is great. It's a delightful romp through the 70s in California, following this band in a oral history interview style. I just think that it's really good. I'm really interested in watching the series that's going to come out that Reese Witherspoon is producing. I think it's going to be great. This was a beautiful cover, the version that we were sent from Penguin UK. Thanks again to them. It's fantastic. I would recommend entirely. This is a really great piece of fiction. So then we got into March and I started reading a lot of fantasy books for the Femme Fantail readathon that took place. I actually got a lot of suggestions for what to read from this from other booktube videos, because reading fantasy is not something that I am ultimately inclined to do all the time. And so I began this journey with a stack of books, a whole TBR for this that I thought I was going to get to. I began with Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Bex and I read this book together. We both sort of had similar feelings on it. I think I wound up liking it a little more than she, but we're going to talk about it later in an upcoming video, I think, so I won't say too much here. After that, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas as well, which I enjoyed a lot more. This was so good, and I was in the fantasy readathon, gotta read all the books, not a moment to waste zone, so much so that when I finished this book in the last 15 minutes at night, one Thursday evening or Tuesday evening, something like that, before they closed, I got out of bed, got dressed, ran quite literally on my feet to the library because I live very close to it, ran there, threw the next book, which is A Court of Mist and Fury, on the counter, and checked it out and ran back home, not a moment to spare, to start reading the next one, and subsequently wound up reading this entire series, which continues on with A Court of Wings and Ruin, and then the most recent, A Court of Frost and Starlight. So that became my entire readathon experience was just Sarah J. Maas, and I think that that was ultimately for the best because I really enjoyed this series. The third one kind of got into some like war, political, tactical stuff that I was really interested in, and I think I actually might do a full review of this series as it sits now, since she's planning to do something else with it upcoming. So be on the lookout for that because that might make its way to the internet. But really enjoyed. If you've read these, please, of course, tell me your thoughts below. My last two books were both book club books that I picked up. First is The Windfall by Dick Shabasu. This is a story very much in sort of like that Jane Austen social commentary type style. It is about a number of characters, but two of them, the Jaws, Mr. and Mrs. Jaw, come into a lot of money, and they wind up moving from sort of this middle-class neighborhood into this very fabulously wealthy neighborhood, and the story really revolves around what you become with money and also how we adapt to different societal expectations, whether or not that is who we are. I think I went into this book a little too expectant. I was expecting a lot more from it, and I walked away disappointed. It was a very easy, very light read. My book club really liked it. Like I said, was disappointed, and I think I gave it 2 stars, but it's something that I might revisit and try and see if I can get anything else from it in the future, I think. And lastly, this book that we most recently read with my book club was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. This I heard about on a different podcast because apparently this is where I get all of my book recommendations now. And it was darkly funny in a very, very dark, funny way. But I was expecting this book to be a little bit more humorous than it was, and I actually wasn't upset that it wasn't as funny as I anticipated. It's a very interesting, thought-provoking plot from a lot of perspectives, a lot of sort of unreliable narrator characteristics in this book, as well as questions of privilege, and also sort of this commentary on art and what we become and foreshadowing of events. And it's also sort of a real masterwork in writing style and different writing style. There are a lot of ideas used in this that you don't see, and actually I think authors shy away from because they feel that readers will be disinterested by the use of repetition or something, or describing small pieces of life. And ultimately, I think the author achieves everything that she sets out to do very, very well. So there they are, the 24 books of the first quarter for me for 2019. Please let me know if you have thoughts on them down in the comments, and if you would be interested in a second quarter books video. I can guarantee you, since my work has gotten a lot busier this spring, that there will be fewer for me to talk about coming up, but if you'd like to see that video, please do let us know. I hope you are having lovely weeks and lovely lives. As always, thank you so much for watching. Everything you want to know about us is in the description, and we will see you very soon.